Hey guys, welcome back. This time we'll be looking at the $50 Hyper Budget Gitrog deck. The short history goes like this. Back when I was a new frogger, I saw the Commander's Quarters video on Gitrog. I asked the Gitrog server what they thought about it, and the response was unanimous. The deck is bad. So, after learning Gitrog a bit more, I enlisted an experienced player and we came up with a new $50 deck. I've since revised it a significant amount and made much better loops, to the point where it's completely different from what it once was. This deck is my pride and joy when it comes to deck building. I have invested dozens of hours into fine-tuning it, combing through lists of cheap cards for potential additions, refining the tech, and making the primer both look good and function well. I will continue to keep this deck updated as I have been thus far. Needless to say, I've been wanting to do this video for a long time. I'll be mimicking the Commander's Quarters style as a combination of homage, throwback, and parody. Finally, this is a combo deck. It's not mid-level, and it can be played at a high level in casual, but even then, it can overperform. This is not anywhere close to full power CDH. The goal of the deck is to be an affordable introduction to how the Gitrog monster works, and it will put you through the same motions you'll see in CDH play. I opted to keep the loops as simple as possible to avoid confusing new players. All links are in the description, of course. Most of what you'll see here is a high-level explanation. The details of everything are in the primer. Without further ado, I give you a good Hyper Budget Gitrog. Alright, so first up is strategy. Our goal is to get a discard outlet and Gitrog on the battlefield and Dakmor Salvage in hand. And how do we win? We loop draws into infinite life and convert that into mana and damage. First, we have ramp. Our turn 1 and turn 2 plays usually see us ramping heavily by playing artifacts and creature dorks like Llanowar Elves. By turn 3, you'll be playing a discard outlet if you have one, and turn 4, Gitrog. The Elves, Arbor Elf, Elvish Mystic, Findhorn Elves, Llanowar Elves, and Kyrian Elves. Other creatures, Deathcap Cultivator, Elysian Caryatid, Skull Prophet, which doubles as a miller, Wall of Roots, can be used on any turn, and Basalthrall, which is more of a mana rain check than ramp. In sorceries, we have Caravan Vigil, Broken Bond, which we'll see later in removal, of course, Explore, Rampant Growth, and Search for Tomorrow. Other than that, we have Dark Ritual. We'll be looping this later. Harrow, which cantrips a draw with Gitrog out as well. Soul Ring, Talisman of Resilience, and Wild Growth. On to discarding equals drawing. Our commander's third ability reads, whenever one or more lands are put into your graveyard from anywhere, draw a card. This means that when we discard a land, we get a draw trigger from Gitrog Monster. Our best discard outlet is Putrid Imp at 1 CMC. After that, we have Oblivion Crown, Noose Constrictor, Wild Mongrel, and Cabal Initiate. It's important for our mana curve that the vast majority of our cards are cheap mana-wise, so that we can quickly and easily get them out when necessary. For this reason, we don't run Scourge Familiar. We can generate infinite mana without it, and its exorbitant mana cost is not worth it. It only slows us down. And now, Dredge. First, we have Dakmor Salvage, which is key to our combo. As a land, it generates a draw trigger from Gitrog when discarded, which we can then replace with its Dredge 2. We'll see this later in the combo. Next up, Golgari Grave Troll, and Stinkweed Imp. And these are really useful for Dredge tutoring, which is essentially a way to dig through our library for Dakmor Salvage. To do this, we need the Gitrog Monster and a discard outlet on the battlefield. A Dredge tutor, in this case Golgari Grave Troll in hand, and a draw trigger, which we'll be discarding a forest to generate. We discard the forest, generating a draw trigger, and in response, Golgari Grave Troll. We replace the draw trigger with Golgari Grave Troll's Dredge 6, putting it back into our hand and milling 6. What we're looking for here is a land to be milled. If one is, and one was here, which it's, keep in mind, it's very likely with these higher dredge count cards, we get a new draw trigger, and we discard Golgari Grave Troll in response. We replace the new draw trigger with Dredge 6. And now we're back at the start. And we can repeat this until we hit Dakmor Salvage, at which point we're ready to combo off. One thing to note is that Gitrog reads whenever one or more land cards is put into a graveyard. So even if we milled 6 cards, it would only count as one draw trigger. Alright, now we have Dark Blast as another dredger. It's a weaker, but eventually gets replaced by Life from the Loam if you choose to upgrade. The other dredgers are Graveshell Scarab and Golgari Brownscale, but these two we don't use for anything outside of the combo. Graveshell Scarab is better to just draw outside of combo, and Golgari Brownscale used to get infinite life in loops. Next up we have tutors. One of our best budget tutors is Jared's Orders. Here it is. We get to get a discard outlet to hand and Golgari Grave Troll to dredge tutor with in the graveyard. After that, we have Nylea's Intervention, which is just a tutor for Dakmor Salvage. Sylvan's Scrying, another tutor for Dakmor Salvage. Final Parting, which can get us both Dakmor and a discard outlet. Mausoleum Secrets, wherever it is, should be right there, which has some conditions, but they're not hard to meet. Rushed Rebirth. Quick thing to note is that we can use it on opponents' creatures, often to easily get Putrid Imp. After that, we have Shred Memory, which we only use for Transmute. And then back on the mana curve issue, we don't run Diabolic Tutor or Shared Summons, though the latter is certainly an option, due to their high mana costs for the effect they provide. Alright, let's toss in a little self-mill. The goal here is to provide a little extra potential to mill into Dakmor Salvage or a Dredger. First up, we have Skull Prophet, which we already looked at in Ramp. After that, we have Abundant Harvest, which isn't actually self-mill, but it can dig a bit. After that, we have Drown in Filth, Witherbloom Command, Grapple with the Past, Grisly Salvage, and, of course, all our dredge value with all our dredgers. Alright, let's splash a bit of card advantage outside of the main method of Gitrog Monster. Here we have Occame Adversary, Peer into the Abyss, which we can usually combo off right afterwards, similar to Ad Nauseam. And then, this one's a bit odd, but Necrologia. This is really advanced, but we can win with this if lucky while still on our own turn. See Cleanup Step Sculpt in the primer if you're interested. Next up, we have a Touch of Protection. First is Autumn's Veil. It's a weaker Veil of Summer, but still very strong. Savage Summoning, for getting out either a Gitrog or a discard outlet. Kaya's Ghost Form, which is only really used for the counter to Exile, but there are other options as well. Then we have Unearth. If I can find it, there it is. It's a little niche, but it can get us a discard outlet back to the battlefield if necessary. And lastly, we have Zurin Orb. This is also a bit advanced, but we use this as a tool to get draw triggers by sacrificing lands. This is important when someone tries to exile Dakmor from your graveyard at the beginning of your combo. Next, more than a touch of removal. Here we see Ebony Charm. If I can find it again. Sorry about this. Alright. Ebony Charm's night job is Grave Hate. I'm looking at you, Underworld Breach. Its daytime is part of the combo, though. After that, we see Caustic Caterpillar, Bone Shards, which we can cantrip a land if we discard one, Duress, Broken Bond, saw this earlier in ramp, but here it is again, Drown in Filth, which gets around Indestructible too, Feed the Swarm, Witherbloom Command, shows up in a lot of categories, it does a lot of stuff. Dark Blast, to an extent, though you can cast it multiple times off of Dredge. Natural State, Nature's Claim, Ulcerate, Beast Within, which is our most versatile as it hits all permanents. Nihil Spellbomb, Grave Hate, and Cabal Pit. Just a -2/-2. Alright, let's add a hint of shuffling. So, Gaia's Blessing is our shuffler. It reads, or it's more specifically, its third ability reads, when Gaia's Blessing is put into your graveyard from your library, shuffle your graveyard into your library. This means when it's milled, we shuffle our entire graveyard into our library. Keep that in mind as we head into the next section, a bucket load of combo. Our expensive card here is Noxious Revival. This will come up shortly in the combo, but it's important because we can pay 2 life instead of mana. We have Ebony Charm again. We loop this to drain our opponent's lives. Dark Ritual, which we loop for infinite black mana. Crop Rotation, which is a slightly more advanced method, but we can either use this to get infinite green, or we use this to get infinite green in a more advanced list. Or more budget list. We don't actually have the cards necessary for that here, but we can go off at instant speed with this, more importantly, by getting out Emergent Zone. Which was the next card as well. Golgari Brownscale, which we loop for infinite life to pay for Noxious Revival's life cost. Graveshell Scarab. We use this to mill Gaia's Blessing after Noxious Revivaling it. And then let's take a look at the tech before we continue. The expanded tech and advanced tips and tricks can be found in the primer. We will need a black mana open before we combo off, represented by this swamp. So part 1 is the Dakmor procedure. Once we have the combo assembled, we can discard Dakmor Salvage, which generates a draw trigger. We replace this draw trigger with its Dredge 2, putting it back into our hand and milling 2. Here we see a land is milled. A draw trigger is generated off that, and we leave that draw trigger on the stack. We don't draw immediately. In response to it, we discard Dakmor Salvage again, generating a new draw trigger and dredging instead of drawing. Milling 2, another land is hit, so now we have 2 draw triggers on the stack. In response, we discard Dakmor Salvage, milling another 2. We see 2 lands. Now it's important to note, Dredge 2, whenever 1 or more lands, so we only get 1 draw trigger off of these 2 lands being milled. Anyway, now we have 3 draw triggers, and We continue. And we repeat until we hit Gaia's Blessing, at which point we have to shuffle. So we put all these cards into our library, we shuffle, and then we continue. We do this until we have enough draw triggers on the stack to draw our whole library. Then we wait until the next shuffle and resolve enough draw triggers to draw our entire library. On to part 2. I keep forgetting. Okay, on to part 2. Infinite draws equals infinite life. I put the unnecessary cards in the exile zone for demonstration purposes, but all of these are actually in our hand. Alright, so now we're going to generate infinite draws and convert that into infinite life with Golgari Brown Scale. We need infinite life in order to use Noxious Revival as much as we want while looping for infinite mana and spells. First up, we discard Gaia's Blessing. Now, when we discard it, it doesn't automatically shuffle. It has to be milled or put into our graveyard from our library. Sorry. We cast Noxious Revival for 2 life, targeting Gaia's Blessing, putting it on top of our library, and Noxious Revival in our graveyard. We discard a land and a non-land, generating a draw trigger, and in response to that draw trigger, we discard Graveshell Scarab. Now, we dredge 1, putting this back in our hand, and milling this. Gaia's Blessing is put into our graveyard, so we shuffle all 4 cards into our library. Now, at this point, we discard Dakmor Salvage and dredge 2, milling 2, Gaia's Blessing is hit, shuffle again, do this, repeat, unlucky, shuffle, repeat, we hit a land and a shuffle. Alright, so we put the draw trigger underneath the shuffle, so we shuffle first, putting these back into our library, and we repeat this infinitely, in theory, and every time the land is milled, a new draw trigger is generated, and every time Gaia's Blessing is milled, we shuffle, and this is shortcuttable. Well, technically not, but doesn't matter here. This is shortcuttable to infinite draws. Now, after this, we continue, but instead of discarding and dredging Dakmor Salvage, we discard and dredge Golgari Brown Scale. This one. Now this reads, when Golgari Brown Scale is put into your hand from your graveyard, you gain 2 life. This means that every time we dredge it, we gain 2 life. Now because we have infinite draws, we can repeat this infinitely, and because we're not getting a draw trigger by discarding this, unlike Dakmor Salvage, we're net losing about 1 draw trigger every other time Gaia's Blessing is milled, on average. So we can repeat this infinitely to get infinite life, and we're actually losing draw triggers at this point, which is good. We want to do that. So we repeat this infinitely until we have 4 draw triggers left on the stack, and we resolve all 4 to draw all 4 cards. Okay, I'll just put them directly into hand. Let's draw all 4 cards. And just like that, we have infinite life, no more draw triggers to worry about, and we're ready for part 3. Part 3 reads, infinite life equals infinite mana and infinite spells. So, we discard Gaia's Blessing, and then we cast Noxious Revival again, targeting it. Now, instead of discarding a non-land, we cast Dark Ritual, putting 3 in our mana pool, and then we discard a land. In response to that draw trigger, we discard Graveshell Scarab, mill Gaia's Blessing, and shuffle all 4 into our library. At this point, we do the same process we did before, discard and dredge, Dakmor Salvage, and then every time the land is milled, a draw trigger is generated, and then every time the shuffler is milled, we shuffle. Now we do this until we have 4 draw triggers, on average maybe 6 to 8 times. and then resolve all 4. And just like that, we have everything back in our hand, and we're ready to repeat. And we can do this for infinite black mana. Every time we cast Dark Ritual, we're losing 1, but we're gaining another 2 on top of the 1 we're gaining 3, 1 is being paid for by the next time we cast Dark Ritual. So we're net gaining 2 black mana every time we loop. Now, after that, we stop casting Dark Ritual, and instead we cast Ebony Charm. Now, target opponent loses 1 life every time we loop, and we gain another life, not that it matters, because at this point we're already at infinite life. And just like that, game's over. Alright, with all of that out of the way, we can now move on to tossing in the base last. Here we see our cantrip lands being Ash Barrens, Barren Moor, Evan Strongholds, Evolving Wilds, Havenwood Battleground, Hickory Woodlot, Peat Bog, Terramorphic Expanse, and Tranquil Thicket. After that, we have multicolor lands. And here we see Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, and Llanowar Wastes. And then we have miscellaneous lands, being Cabal Pit, which we use to kill stuff, and Emergent Zone, which we use to go off at instant speed. You can read about that in the primer. Then we have 10 forests and 9 swamps to pad out our lands. And we're done looking at the list. All cards are priced at market. No damage or heavily played cards here. The main deck list sits at about $10,000, as opposed to this list at exactly $50 at this time. It fluctuates a bit. If it goes up too high, I adjust, and if it goes down too low, then I add in more expensive cards to compensate. I selected $50 in upgrades for the purposes of this video, but for a full upgrade guide, see the primer. Here we remove Harrow for Lotus Petal, which is loopable and allows a 0 mana start, so no need for that black mana to begin. We remove Dark Blast, getting Life from the Loam, which is excellent value and can dredge a lot. Then we remove Witherbloom Command for Reign of Filth, which both creates draw triggers and mana. We remove Caustic Caterpillars, adding in Elves of Deep Shadow, more ramp. We already have plenty of artifact and enchantment removal. We cut a forest for Crystal Vein, another cantrip land, and we cut a swamp for Twilight Mire. We can loop this with crop rotation to convert our infinite black after combo into a mix of green and black. You can see all of these cards in the primer, in the upgrade section. Once again, all links are in the description. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to join the Gitrog server and ping me. That's the most surefire way to get my attention. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.